It was a peaceful Sunday morning in New York. The subway car glided smoothly along the tracks, its passengers lost in their own little worlds. Some read newspapers, some rested with their eyes closed, and others simply stared at nothing in particular, absorbed in thought. It was one of those rare, quiet moments in the city. Mark sat by the window, enjoying the calmness of the ride. He wasn't in a rush, just another slow morning, watching the city pass by, and then everything changed. A man stepped into the subway with his children. 3 of them. The moment they entered, the silence shattered like glass. The kids ran up and down the car, yelling at each other, laughing loudly, throwing things. One of them snatched a newspaper from an old man's hands. Another bumped into a woman, nearly knocking her coffee over. Mark watched, his jaw tightening. He could feel the irritation spreading through the car, like a ripple. People exchanged annoyed glances, sighing heavily. But what frustrated Mark the most wasn't the kids, it was their father. The man sat down right next to him, slumped in his seat, his eyes closed as if he hadn't even noticed the chaos around him. Not a single word, not a single attempt to control his children. Mark clenched his fists. How could someone be so inconsiderate? Minutes passed, and the children only got louder. Mark could see the exasperation on the faces of the other passengers. The woman whose coffee had almost spilled was glaring at the father. The old man whose newspaper had been snatched was shaking his head in disapproval. Finally, Mark couldn't take it any more. He turned to the man and said, trying to keep his voice even, "Sir, your children are disturbing a lot of people. Maybe you could ask them to calm down." The man slowly opened his eyes and looked at Mark, his expression blank, distant, as if he had just now realized where he was. Then, in a soft, broken voice, he said, "Oh, you're right. I guess I should do something about it. We just came from the hospital. Their mother died about an hour ago. I don't know what to do, and I guess they don't know." His irritation evaporated in an instant. The frustration that had built up inside him suddenly felt small, meaningless. He looked at the kids again, not as noisy brats, but as children lost in confusion and grief, acting out because they didn't know any other way to cope. And their father, he wasn't careless, he wasn't inconsiderate, he was drowning in his own sorrow. Mark felt a lump in his throat, how quickly his perspective had changed. Instead of frustration, he now felt compassion. He placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "Is there anything I can do?" The man gave a weak smile, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He didn't say anything, but in that silence, something changed. The lady, whose coffee had almost spilled, reached into her bag and pulled out a candy, handing it gently to one of the kids. The little boy, who had been restless just moments ago, looked up at her, his mischief softening into something more innocent. The old man, whose newspaper had been snatched, now leaned forward, smiling, tapping one of the boys on the shoulder, playfully engaging with them. And Mark, he found himself helping the children, gently guiding their play. Instead of resisting it, he showed them how to balance on their seats, engaged them in small talk, and smiled. Mark's paradigm shifted. Suddenly, he saw things differently, and because he saw differently, he thought differently, he felt differently, he behaved differently. His irritation vanished. He didn't have to worry about controlling his attitude or behavior. His heart was simply filled with the man's pain. In an instant, everything changed. Moral of the story: every situation can be seen from different perspectives. A shift in perspective can transform the entire experience in an instant.